When you program using an NXT, remember that the motors go into ports labeled A, B, and C. Sensors go into ports labeled 1, 2, 3, and 4. So take a look at this program that we have written where we're referring to a touch sensor and later on to a light sensor. And here we're turning on motor C, and here we're turning on a motor called A. But we see all these X's. That's because the programs won't work and they won't be able to use motors or sensors without setting them up first. So there's a menu under Robot, and we can scroll down to Motor and Sensor Setup. When we click on this, there are 3 tabs: Standard Models, Motors, and Sensors. So we're going to look at Motors first. If we see this line of program that is highlighted below, we can see that that motor is called A. So in the Motor and Sensor Setup, I'm going to just type A. That is the name of the motor. That name must correspond to what is written down in the program. If I write nothing in the name for a program, then the default is motor C with C capitalized. Notice that in the other motor line, motor C is what must be in these brackets. So if we write nothing for motor, then it defaults to motor C. Let's click on the Sensor tab. We have 2 sensors. We are going to put the touch sensor in port 1. So let's name it Touch. This name that we put in the sensor setup must correspond to the line in the program referring to that sensor. So this is Touch all lowercase, therefore this must be Touch all lowercase. And we need to tell it what kind of sensor that is. It seems a little bit redundant, but it is a touch sensor. So now we've created a touch sensor and we've named it Touch all lowercase. Let's put a light sensor into port number 3. I'm going to call that Light all lowercase, and we're going to then tell it what kind of sensor. A light sensor. We'll talk about what the difference between these 2 things is at a later tutorial, but for now we're going to use a light reflected NXT. Click Apply, and you will see that up at the top of the program, new code came in which corresponds to what you just set up, which is there's a sensor on port 1 and it's called Touch. There's another sensor on port 3 and it's called Light. This is telling us what kinds of sensors those are. The touch is a touch sensor, light is a light sensor. And finally, the third line says motor A is called A, and this just tells us a little bit about what kind of program it is. Now if we recompile this, notice the X's all went away and this program is now workable. However, there's one more thing. We need to remember that our physical robot must correspond to what we just wrote. Therefore, this motor must go into port A, just like we set it up. The other motor must go into port C, just like the setup. Whatever we wrote over here must correspond to the robot here. We put the touch sensor in port 1. Here's the touch sensor. Put that into port 1. Here's the light sensor. goes into port 3. You can put them into different ports, but whatever you type here, whatever you set up in motor and sensor setup, must correspond to what you do here in the physical robot.